My dad gave our family business to my sister's boyfriend after I worked there for years, so I left and made them ask me for help. I'm a 31-year-old man who has worked in my family's commercial fishing business since I was a youngster. My grandpa began it, my dad made it bigger, and I was meant to be next in line. For more than 50 years, our family business has been a commercial fishing company. My grandpa started with only one boat and grew it into a fleet of 8 boats that bring seafood to restaurants in 3 states. I spent much of my childhood on those boats. I recall waking up around 4 a.m. when I was 8 years old to go with my dad to the docks and watch the men get the boats ready as the sun came rising. When I was 12, I knew every kind of fish we caught and how much they were worth per pound. When I was 16, I helped manage the crew schedules in the summer. By the time I was 22, while my college buddies were receiving internships at desk jobs, I was already managing our biggest customer relationships while finishing my business degree. I'm 6 feet 2 inches tall, and I spend most mornings at the gym. My dad, who is 59 years old, has always relied on me when things went wrong. For example, last year, when one of our boats broke down 50 miles offshore, I was the one who organized the rescue operation, got a replacement part helicoptered out, and saved a $200,000 catch from going bad. That's the kind of problem solving I did every day. While I was learning the ropes and working hard on the boats, my sister Vanessa, who is 28 years old, never showed any interest in the business. She kept changing her major in college, first to psychology, then to communications, and finally to marketing. She finally settled on graphic design, but she hasn't done much with her degree. I don't blame her. Not everyone is cut out for the grind of a family business. But I was the one who had been there, who knew every client by name, who could tell you the profit margins on every species we caught, and who had worked personally with every captain in our fleet. Over the years, I've dated on and off, but nothing serious. The business has always been my main focus. My last girlfriend broke up with me because she said I was married to the job. Maybe that's true, but when you've put your heart and soul into something your whole life, it becomes a part of you. So, when Dad called a family meeting 2 years ago, I thought he was finally ready to talk about succession planning. I had been subtly bringing it up for months, saying I had ideas for expanding our distribution network and modernizing some of our processes without losing the personal touch that made us special. We all met in the dining room of my parents' house, the same house I grew up in, with fishing photos and mounted catches on the walls. Mom, who is 57 years old, made her famous clam chowder, and even though it was a Tuesday night, it felt like a special occasion. Dad cleared his throat like he always does, before saying something important. I've decided to take a step back from daily operations, he said. Fair enough, I thought. He had worked hard his whole life, building on what his father had started, and he deserved to enjoy his later years. He was almost 60 and still worked 12-hour days sometimes. I sat up straighter, ready to hear about my new duties. But then he dropped a bombshell. I'm putting Todd in charge as the new operations manager. Todd was my sister's boyfriend of 18 months, a 33-year-old entrepreneur who had never held a job for more than a year. For heaven's sake, the guy wore loafers to our boat dock. The first time he came to the marina, he asked if the diesel fuel we use in the boats was environmentally friendly. I nearly burst out laughing. I looked at my sister, who was beaming and squeezing Todd's hand. Todd sat there with this satisfied smirk, nodding as if he'd known all along. Todd has fresh ideas, my dad continued, oblivious to my shock. He has an MBA, and we need someone with a different perspective. I later found out Todd's MBA was from some online certificate program that cost $2,000 and took 6 weeks to complete. But in that moment, I was too stunned to even ask questions. That's why we need him, Dad said, as if it was the most logical thing in the world. He doesn't know anything about commercial fishing. He's not bogged down by industry conventions. He can see opportunities we're missing. I looked at my mom, hoping for support, but she just gave me that look she always does when she doesn't want to contradict Dad in public. Vanessa was glaring at me like I just insulted her firstborn child. I tried not to show how upset I was, because I didn't want to seem like the jealous son. I nodded and congratulated Todd, who had a smug little grin that made me want to throw him overboard. After dinner, I took my dad aside in his study, which was where he taught me how to tie fishing knots when I was a kid. Don't you believe the person in charge should know what they're doing? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. You mean you? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Dad, I've been in charge of half the business for years. I know our clients, our vehicles, and our personnel. I am in charge of the northeastern accounts that bring in 40% of our revenue. That's the problem, Jake. You're too stuck in the past. Todd has a plan to bring things up to date. Which vision? He has never even worked in this field. Dad put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Son, sometimes new eyes see things we can't. Give him a shot. He has some solid ideas regarding how to make our web presence bigger. Being online, Dad, our business is based on relationships. People buy from us because they trust us. For decades, we have shown that we can be trusted. That doesn't come from a website or social media. Things are changing in the world, Jake. We have to change with it. I should have fought harder then and told my dad exactly why this was a bad idea, but I respected him too much. I thought he saw something in Todd that I didn't. That was a big mistake. Our once solid business was going downhill fast 6 months later. We lost Fleming Seafood, a client we'd had for 25 years, and then Coastal Cuisine, another big account. Captain Mike, who had been with us since I was a baby, quit along with 2 other experienced captains. I was still in charge of our East Coast clients, which was a good thing because they were still making money. Every morning, I'd wake up at 4:30, go to the gym for an hour, and be at the docks by 6:30 to make sure our day boats left on time. Then I'd go to the office to answer calls, manage shipments, and fix problems. Basically doing everything I always did, but now with the added challenge of working around Todd's improvements. One of those changes was a new routing system that made no sense if you knew anything about coastal navigation or fuel efficiency. Another was a $50,000 software package that was supposed to make things easier, but mostly just made things harder and crashed all the time. Then there was the $30,000 redesign of the logo and website that didn't bring in any new business. But the most obvious change every time I walked into headquarters was the mood. It felt like a funeral home. People looked miserable and tense, as if they were just waiting for the axe to fall. Todd had fired 2 of our office staff, who had been with us for years, and replaced them with his friends, who spent more time on their phones than actually working. One day, after I finished taking inventory, Ray, our fleet maintenance manager for more than 20 years, pulled me aside. Ray is the kind of guy who can fix anything with an engine. He's worth his weight in gold in our business. His hands are always stained with engine grease, and he has a permanent sunburn from spending so much time on the water. "Jake, this place is going to hell," he mumbled, looking over his shoulder to make sure no one heard. "Todd doesn't know his ass from a hole in the ground. He's changed the routes, which means we're using more petrol. He has made half of the dock workers mad and hired 3 of his college friends who have no idea how to run a commercial fishing business." "What does my dad think about all this?" I inquired, already knowing the answer. Ray just shook his head. "Your dad is hardly ever here anymore. Todd tells him everything is good, shows him some charts with nice graphics, and your dad loves it up." "What about the captains who are no longer here?" Dad must have asked about that. Todd told him that they didn't want to change and that we needed younger captains anyway. He even dubbed them dinosaurs, if you can believe that. Your dad seemed to believe it, even though those dinosaurs had kept this business going through storms, recessions, and everything else for 50 years. I was trying to be calm, but I was really angry. I had spent my whole adult life helping to establish this firm, knowing everything about it, and earning the respect of our workers and clients. Now, this was ruining it, and my dad was allowing it happen. That afternoon, I tried to call Fleming Seafood to find out why they truly left us. The owner, Sam Fleming, had always been honest with me. We had dinner at each other's houses, and I watched his kids grow up. He said, "Jake, it's been a while," when he heard my voice. "Yes, Sam, I heard that you folks aren't buying from us anymore." There was a pause. "Listen, I didn't want to cause trouble, but Todd, the new man, is a problem. First, he raised our prices without telling us. After that, he messed up 3 shipments in a row. He basically told me that if I didn't like it, I could find another supplier when I contacted to complain. My blood pressure was going up. He said that you guys were heading upscale and couldn't serve clients who were sensitive to price anymore. We've been doing business with Jake for 25 years. Your granddad used to bring us our orders himself. It hurt like a slap in the face. I said sorry a lot, but it was too late. Sam had made a deal with another supplier. I called 3 additional past clients and heard the same thing. Todd was slowly ruining connections that had taken years to create. I couldn't sleep that night. I couldn't stop thinking about my grandfather and how he started this firm from scratch. I remembered how happy he was when my dad took it over and made it bigger. They were both proud when I joined, but now an egotistical jerk who knows nothing about our field is ruining it all in a few of months. I made up my mind that it was time to have a real conversation with my dad. I talked to him after not sleeping for a few nights. It's always been hard for us to get along. He was old-fashioned and showed he cared by teaching you how to tie knots or fix an engine instead of saying, "I love you." But I knew he cared about the legacy my grandfather left behind. On a Sunday, I found him alone in the main office. He was probably going over some papers to figure out what Todd was doing wrong. As soon as I brought up the problems with the business, he changed how he stood. His jaw was hard, and his shoulders were straight. That's how he acts when he's in a tight spot. "Hey, Dad, we need to talk about what's going on with the business." "Jake, everything is fine. There is always a time of adjustment when new management comes in." "Things aren't okay, Dad. We've lost 5 big clients in 6 months. 3 of our best captains have quit, and Todd's new routes are making our fuel costs go through the roof." He said, "Todd is innovative. People have a hard time with change. Innovation is great, but he's losing clients we've had for decades. The captains are leaving. Our fuel costs have gone up 30% because of his new routing system, which doesn't make sense if you know anything about coastal navigation, which Todd clearly doesn't." Dad let out a big sigh. "I've known my whole life that every new manager makes mistakes. When I took over from your grandfather, Jake, I made a lot of mistakes. Normal learning curves don't apply here, Dad. The business is losing money." Captain Mike said, "Todd barely knows Bo from Stern, and he's making decisions about fleet operations." At that point, my dad's face got rigid. "So that's it? You're mad because I didn't make you the boss?" That hit me hard, like a punch to the belly. "Stop it, Dad. This isn't about me. It's about keeping what Grandpa built, what you built, and what I've helped build for the last 10 years. You don't think I know what's best for this business? I've been in charge of it since before you were born. Then why can't you see what Todd is doing? Have you talked to any of our clients? Have you asked them why they're leaving? Have you asked the captains why they're quitting?" Dad moved some papers about on his desk. "Todd has gone over all of that. The clients who left were too demanding and not making enough money. The captains weren't getting used to the new systems." "And you believe that, Dad?" I talked to Sam Fleming yesterday. Todd told him we were moving up market and couldn't cater to price-sensitive clients anymore. Sam's been with us for 25 years. Grandpa used to deliver fish to him personally. "Things change, Jake. Not all of our old clients are a good fit for our new business model." "What new business model? Are you losing money, making loyal customers angry, losing experienced workers?" I was having a hard time keeping my voice down. Dad stood up with a determined look on his face. "That's enough! I'm still in charge of this business, and I make the choices. Todd is bringing us into the modern age, like it or not. But he didn't hear me. He ignored all of my worries and had a reason for every issue. Todd just needed some time. The clients who departed were too demanding, and the captains who quit didn't want to make the improvements that needed to be made. I felt like I was going insane when I left. My dad had always been a smart businessman with good gut feelings. How could he not know what was going on? I got a call from Captain Mike that night. For more than 30 years, Captain Mike has worked for our organization. He showed me how to find my way around, how to read the weather, and how to catch fish when other people couldn't. He was just as important to our business as the boats were. "Jake, I need to tell you something I couldn't say while I was still there. I think Todd is stealing money." The numbers didn't make sense, and all of a sudden, he had a shiny new Audi and took Vanessa to the Bahamas last month. My heart sank. This wasn't just a mistake. It could be fraud. But who would believe me if I said something? I'd just appear like the angry son who didn't get picked. "Mike, do you have any proof?" "Nothing solid, but I did see some papers on his desk once. Bills from a company I'd never heard of." He got incredibly defensive and stated it was none of my business when I asked about it. For consultancy services, that company was getting $5,000 a month. "Have you ever seen somebody from this firm at our office? Is there any proof that they were actually doing something for that money?" "Nope. I never saw anyone or heard of any consulting going on." But here's the kicker. I checked up the company later and found out that Todd's brother-in-law from his first marriage owns it. The parts were starting to make sense now. Todd wasn't simply bad at his job. He was stealing from us, from my family, and from the business my grandfather and father had created over the course of more than 50 years. But I realized that telling my dad what I thought wouldn't be enough. I needed confirmation and to know exactly how serious the harm was before it was too late. I asked my sister to lunch because I thought she might listen to reason. Big mistake. We met at a sushi restaurant close to her home. Vanessa came 15 minutes late and looked annoyed that I had interrupted her day. She was always the youngest in the family, and everyone made allowances for her. "So, what's going on here?" She didn't even say hello. "I have a meeting at 2. It's about the business." "Vanessa, things aren't going well." She rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. You've never given Todd a chance. Since day one, you've been working against him because you think you should be in charge of the business." I did my best to keep calm. "This isn't about who deserves what. It's about the company's health. Have you checked the figures recently? 3 of our biggest clients have left, our finest captains have departed, and there are big concerns about the money." Her face turned crimson. What does that mean? Where did Todd receive the cash for the Audi or your trip to the Bahamas? He worked for a failing startup that didn't even pay him his last paycheck. She got up so quickly that her chair tumbled over. How could you? He received a loan for the automobile and used points from his credit card to pay for the vacation. You're just lying because you can't tolerate that Dad trusts him more than you do. People in the restaurant were looking at them now, I said softly. Vanessa, I'm not trying to hurt you or Todd. I'm scared about the firm, Dad's legacy, and the workers who depend on us for their jobs. Oh, please, you're such a martyr. You always act like you're the only one who cares about the family. You can't tolerate that Todd is moving the company into the 21st century because it means you're not as important as you thought you were. That hurt, but I kept going. Has Todd told us why our profits have dropped by 40% since he took over? Or why we lost the Coastal Cuisine account, which was worth 15% of our annual revenue? Those old clients were getting in our way. Todd is concentrating on higher-end eateries that pay better. Except that isn't going to happen. We aren't obtaining those high-end clients, and we're losing the ones we've had for years. She picked up her bag and stood up. I can't take this anymore. You're just angry and jealous because Dad sees something in Todd that he doesn't see in you. She left the restaurant in a rage, leaving me with 2 dinners that I hadn't touched and a bad feeling in my stomach. I had never seen my sister act that way. She was always the one who could see both sides and keep the peace in the family. She was now utterly blind to Todd. That night, she sent me a text that said, "Stay away from the business and from Todd and me. You're toxic, and Dad agrees with me." That's when I understood I was really alone in this struggle. I spent the next few days looking for information. I talked to more ex-colleagues, clients who had left us, and even some of our suppliers. The picture that came out was worse than I had imagined. Todd had upset not only our clients, but also our suppliers. He was behind on payments, tried to change long-term contracts, and even said he would move his company elsewhere if they didn't cut their pricing, not knowing that there weren't always other options in our specialist field. Dave, one of our boat mechanics, told me that Todd had skimped on maintenance to save money. He urged us to wait longer between oil changes so the parts would last longer. That's really unsafe on a commercial ship. Jake, you know it better than anyone. I had been aboard a boat 100 miles offshore when the motor broke down. We were lucky that the Coast Guard got to us before the storm hit. Not doing maintenance right could not only hurt your business, but it could also kill people. But the more I learned, the more I felt like I was stuck. My dad wouldn't listen. My sister had turned against me. And meanwhile, Todd was gradually ruining everything my family had created. I thought about it and realized I just had one choice: to face Todd personally. I texted Todd and asked him to meet me at a cafe close to the waterfront. He said yes, perhaps because he thought his phony charm would help things out. Before our meeting, I spent time gathering information, talking to former colleagues, looking over financial data I still had access to, and talking to clients who had left. I didn't just have suspicions, I had facts. Todd arrived 20 minutes late, wearing fancy sunglasses and that smile that never goes away. "Hey Jake, what's up, man?" he said. "Hey," and tried to give me one of those bro embraces. I stayed in my seat. "Let's stop the nonsense, Todd. I know what you're doing to the business." His smile became a little less bright. "Okay, I understand. It's hard to change. Your dad told me you would have problems getting used to the new path." "New path?" I laughed. "Is that what we mean when we say that we lost 40% of our clients, or that 3 captains departed after more than 15 years? Or maybe the new direction is the $43,000 that went missing from the maintenance fund just before you bought your Audi?" The smirk was gone totally. He said, "You don't know what you're talking about. I grew up in this business, Todd. I know what I'm talking about. I know that this is the first time in 30 years that we're losing money. I know you chose your college classmate to be our new accountant, even though he has never worked in commercial fishing before. And I know my dad gave you more than 30% of the business without telling me." That last part was a conjecture based on what Captain Mike had said, but Todd's reaction verified it. Todd leaned down and added, "Your dad knows talent when he sees it. Maybe he would have picked you instead if you weren't so set in your ways." Todd's expression got darker. This business was built on those old ways: relationships, trust, and expertise, things you don't know anything about. "Jake, I understand that you're upset, but the business is changing and growing. Your dad knows it, even if you don't. And I want to make it obvious that this isn't just your dad's business anymore. It's also mine. So, unless you want to make a major family drama that will hurt your dad's feelings, I advise you back off and let me do my job." I wanted to hit him in the face, but instead, I just stood up and looked down at him. "This isn't done yet, Todd. My grandfather and father worked hard and were honest to build this firm. "Your dad already chose sides, Jake," he said as I walked out. "I won't let you ruin it with your incompetence and greed. Don't make this worse for yourself." I thought about what we talked about on the way home. Todd had very much said that my dad had given him a stake in the business that my family owned and that I had worked in my whole life. He hadn't even told me. It seemed like the worst betrayal ever, not just from my dad, but from everyone in the family. They pushed me aside for a smooth-talking scam artist who was taking all the money from the business. I punched my heavy bag for an hour when I got home, and my knuckles hurt. Then I took a cold shower and attempted to clear my head. I had two choices. I could keep battling to salvage a business that my family, the owners, appeared intent to push into the ground, or I could walk away, focus on my own future, and let them deal with the repercussions of their choices. The fighter in me wanted to stay and fight, but the realist realized that I was just bashing my head against a wall without my dad's help and my sister's understanding. I made one final effort to preserve the company. I would get hard proof of Todd's bad management and possible fraud. Proof that was so strong that even my dad couldn't ignore it. For the next week, I got everything in order. I called Marcus, an accountant and longtime family friend who has done work for our business over the years. He helped me get into the company's financial records, which my dad had never really locked me out of. What we found made me feel nauseous. In just 8 months, Todd had taken out $120,000 in business development loans without a clear plan for how to use the money. He also hired 4 pals to work in fake jobs that paid over $300,000, and he changed the routes of our fleet in ways that made fuel expenditures go up by 42%. He had lost 5 of the 8 we had. Todd's top clients let him put the corporate credit card in his name, and he spent $67,000 on restaurants, electronics stores, and high-end hotels. The kicker was that my dad had really given Todd 30% of the business, and Todd could buy another 30% at a stupidly low price within 3 years. Todd's uncle, who was a corporate lawyer, had written the papers. As we went over the papers, Marcus looked worried. "Jake, this is bad, really bad. If things keep going this way, the company will go bankrupt in a year. Is there anything illegal here? Anything we could use to get out of the contract?" Marcus asked, pointing to a few questionable transactions. "These payments to Atlantic Consulting Group, that company doesn't seem to exist except on paper. It's registered to an address that's actually a UPS store. And these equipment purchases, the amounts seem inflated, and there's no sign of the equipment actually arriving at your facility. So he's stealing?" I asked. "It looks that way, but to prove it in court, we'd need a forensic audit and probably a lawsuit. It would get ugly." I printed everything down and went to visit my dad at home. He was in his workshop, which is where he always went to ponder. He was building a scale model of the first fishing boat we ever had, which was the one my grandfather used to start the business. "Dad, we need to talk about Todd." He looked up from the model, and I could see the defiant look on his face that I knew so well. "Jake, I thought we had come to an agreement." I put the papers on his workbench and said, "You need to see these. Todd is draining the company of money. He's sending money to himself and his friends. He's ruined client relationships that took decades to build." At first, my dad tried to ignore it all. "These are just growing pains. There are always bumps in the road when there is a change in leadership. Growing pains don't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, Dad. Look at this. Payments to a fake consulting company owned by Todd's brother-in-law, inflated equipment purchases for things we never got, and personal expenses charged to the company card." As I showed him paper after document and spreadsheet after spreadsheet, his barriers started to fall apart. When I eventually showed him the purchases on the corporate card from a fancy resort in the Bahamas, he didn't say anything. He looked up at me with tired eyes after a long silence. "Jake, what do you want me to do? I signed a contract and promised him I would." "Your word doesn't mean much to a con man, Dad. We need to talk to a lawyer to see if we can get out of the contract because of fraud." He shook his head. "That would break up the family. Your sister loves him, and they want to get married. So you'd rather let Todd ruin everything you and Grandpa built? Everything I've worked for my whole life?" My dad turned his head away. "I need time to think. This is a lot to take in." I left the papers with him, thinking they would finally make him see the truth. But as I drove away, I had a sickening feeling that it was too late. The damage might already be too bad to fix. The next day, my dad called and told me to go to work. When I got there, I was surprised to see Todd and my sister seated there with him. "Jake," my dad replied in a way that didn't sound right, "I've talked to Todd about your worries, and he's explained everything to my satisfaction." Todd had that smug expression on his face again, and my sister stared at me. "Explained what exactly?" I asked, getting angrier. "How he's stealing money? How he's losing our best clients? Those are big claims. These are accusations that could be considered defamation if you started spreading them around, Todd replied, his voice calm, but with a hint of threat. My dad raised his hand. Nobody is accusing anyone of anything. There have been some strange financial choices, but Todd has explained them all. The consulting fees were for market research, and the equipment purchases went to a new supplier who offered better quality. And you really think that? I said back. Did you ask to see the market research? Did you make sure the new equipment really got there? That's enough, Jake, my sister said. All you've done is try to make things harder for Todd, who has been working his butt off to modernize this old company. I glanced at each of them in turn. My dad looked away from me, my sister was angry and defensive, and Todd was happy. At that point, I knew I had lost the whole war, not just the fight. I've had enough, I murmured softly. You've made your choice. I hope it works out for you. I left the workplace, the business, and that part of my life behind. The hardest thing I'd ever done was leave behind all I'd worked so hard to build. But sometimes, the only way to stay sane is to let go. I did what any man with self-respect would do to let go. I moved on and worked on making my own life. I got a position at Harborside Seafood, which used to be one of our competitors. In less than 6 months, I was promoted to operations director and was able to bring a few of our previous clients with me. I would have loved to entirely forget about my family's business, but I couldn't help but keep an eye on it through Ray, who still worked there and gave me updates from time to time. It was like witnessing a vehicle crash in slow motion. Todd got another costly automobile, my sister started posting images of expensive jewelry, and my dad grew less and less interested. He spent much of his time alone on his tiny fishing boat. Then COVID came along, and the restaurant business fell apart in a single night. A well-run business may have made it through the storm. We had been through a lot of tough times before, but Todd's bad management had left the company with no money and a lot of debt. My phone rang at 11 p.m., 14 months after I left. My sister was crying so hard that I could scarcely understand her. Jake, we need, she said, gasping. She told me the business was bankrupt when she was calm enough to talk. The bank had taken 4 of the boats, and the personnel on the other boats hadn't been paid in 3 weeks. The tension had caused my dad to have a little heart attack. Where is Todd? I inquired, even though I already knew the answer. There was more crying. He left. He took all the money from our joint account and disappeared. He left me a note saying the business failed because Dad wouldn't let him fully implement his vision. I almost chuckled at how ridiculous it was. So, now you want my help? I questioned. Jake, please. Dad's health is at stake. The doctors say he needs to avoid stress, but the bank is threatening to take the house since he used it as collateral for a loan that Todd convinced him to take out. We don't know what to do. Part of me wanted to say, I told you so. Another part wanted to hang up and let them deal with the mess they had made when they pushed me aside. But another part of me, the part that still remembered fishing with my dad when I was 8 and loved my sister no matter what, couldn't do it. Okay, I'll come by tomorrow to look at the papers, I answered finally. I can't promise anything. The next day I stepped into my boyhood home and saw my dad seated at the kitchen table with overdue notices and legal papers all around him. He looked like he had aged 10 years. My sister wouldn't even look me in the eye. There were packing boxes all around the house because they were getting ready to move out. Sorry, son, my dad murmured quietly. You were right about everything. Todd had run away to Mexico with more than $200,000 in stolen money. He forged my dad's signature on a few documents, which might help us in court, but the business is still in ruins. He maxed out the company credit cards, emptied the business accounts, and even taken out loans using company assets as collateral. My sister looked like she had just seen a ghost. I really thought he loved me, she remarked in a flat voice. I had stood up for him against everyone, and he was only exploiting her to get to the business. I wanted to reply, no kidding, but I couldn't bring myself to hurt her further when I saw how devastated she was. I started calling people instead. I got in touch with others I knew in the business, called Marcus for legal advice, and called the clients I hadn't taken to Harborside yet to see if they would be willing to come back under new management. I even called Captain Mike, who was now working for a different fishing company, to get his opinion. The damage was huge. Todd had not only ruined the business's finances, but he had also ruined its reputation in the industry. Suppliers had been cheated, clients had gotten bad items, and the fleet had been let to rot so badly that 2 of the boats weren't even safe to use anymore. But I resolved to give it one final go, not for my dad or sister who had broken my trust, but for my grandfather, the legacy he had built, and the people who had been devoted to us for decades. We were able to salvage 2 of the boats and keep the business going, though in a much reduced way. It took 6 months of 80-hour weeks, court battles, refinancing, and rebuilding confidence. My sister went back to school to finish her business degree, and my dad slowly got more and more proud as we worked together. One night, while we were going over the books in the office and displaying a real profit for the first time since Todd took over, my dad looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "I should have trusted you, Jake. You were always the heart of this business, just like your grandfather." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. They had learned their lesson. I've learned the hard way that I sometimes think about Todd, who is presumably on a beach somewhere with another woman drinking. I can easily picture him tricking people again. But then I remember what we've built. Something true, honest, and solid based on trust and hard work. Karma can be hard, but so can the law. The FBI called us 2 months ago. It turns out that Todd had done the same thing to other firms before ours, and they had been keeping an eye on him for years. Our case gave them enough proof to issue a warrant for arrest around the world. They've frozen assets in 3 countries, and there are claims that he was seen in Cancun. He won't be living the good life for long. I am now the official owner and CEO of what we have christened Founding Father Fishing, in honor of my grandfather. Dad gave me the rest of his shares, keeping only 10% for himself as a consultant. He is finally enjoying semi-retirement, going out on the boats when he wants to, and trusting me to handle the business. I can see my sister at work in accounting, where she works every day to prove herself. The Todd incident brought her down in ways that nothing else could have. She found a billing mistake last week that saved us $155,000. It's a good start. We only have 3 boats now instead of 8, but they are all in good shape and working well. I hired Captain Mike and Ray back again, this time giving them each a part in the business so they wouldn't want to quit again. We are progressively repairing our image in the market, and some of our old clients have come back. I still go to the gym every morning at 5 a.m. I labor until the sun goes down, and I check each boat myself before it leaves the harbor. Some people say I'm obsessive, but I just care about what I've made. I took our newest boat out for a 14-hour cruise in heavy seas last month, and we caught a record amount of fish. There's nothing like coming back to port with a full hold, knowing you've beaten everything the ocean threw at you. Sometimes, Dad looks at me with a mix of pride and sadness. I know he's still upset about Todd and how he almost lost everything our family had worked so hard to build. After a really fantastic day, he tried to say he was sorry again one night. "Son, I stopped him. "Done, Dad. It's all in the past. We're moving forward now." He nodded, knowing that some things don't need to be addressed. The company is smaller now, but it's stronger. No one will ever take it away from me again. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's rebuilding better than before. Todd tried to tear us apart, but instead, he made us take everything apart and start again from scratch. We are now smarter, leaner, and hungrier than ever. I haven't been on vacation in 2 years, and I haven't been in a serious relationship in even longer. But I know it was all worth it when I stand on the dock at morning and see my boats, workers, and family legacy leave for the sea. Family companies aren't only about making money. They're also about leaving a legacy, being proud, and developing something that will survive after you're gone. Todd never got that. He thought of our business as a way to make quick money by taking advantage of it. He never understood that the family aspect is what makes a family business exceptional. The generations of expertise, the pride in doing things well, and the responsibility you feel to those who came before you and those who will come after. So, if you're reading this and dealing with your own Todd issue, my advice is simple. Fight like hell for what matters. And if you lose that struggle, be ready to leave and start over. That's the only way to really save what's vital sometimes. The business might be smaller now, but it's still mine, and no one can take it away from me.